Yeah, it's already recording for the AI note taker, so we are double recording.
Right.
Yes.
At least I think so, yeah. Yeah, so you had some points that you were up to discussion, and I think that maybe if should we do some introductions? Do you want to introduce a bit? If Kambai starts by introducing your thing, and then Peter can continue afterwards. Would that be okay?
Okay. Yeah. All right. So let me start before Peter will come in. Yeah. So my name is Kambai, also named Levi or Levi, and I am from Central Nigeria, and I work on the Tyap language. I have been working or have been studying or researching on this very language since about 2007. And I actually initially didn't know my own mother tongue, but had to study it, learn it by traveling to the village area to get my cousin to take me to the older people who knew how to speak the language, and then I began to translate from English to Tiaf, English to Tiaf, and then in the process, I happened to meet members of the Tiaf language translation committee that was in charge of the Bible translation. And then I began to visit them often. And then I acquainted myself with the orthography. And around 2020, I then put up an application for the TIAP Wikipedia to be, introduced, and we began to work in person events, online events, and then we got an approval in 2023, and then 2022, and then Wiktionary continued, and then we got an approval for the TIAP Wiktionary also in 2023. And so this is basically what we do now in the TIAP Wikimedians user group, which we also got an approval for in the year 2022. Uh, so my own aspiration and desire is to actually see that the language becomes very common online in such a way that people who need to actually learn this language won't have to like suffer the way I did, and then be able to learn the much they can and also have people to respond to their questions. Yeah, so that's basically what drives me. Yeah.
Thank you. And Peter, you want to talk? Yes.
Yes. So thank you. It's very, very interesting to hear, and we can. Yeah, we'll. I guess we'll get back to that. I'll just give a quick presentation of myself then. Yeah. So my background is actually mainly from East Asian linguistics. I did my first degree in Japanese, and then did my master's in Old Japanese, where most of my experience with Reconstruction, and it's not really a big part, but I mean I've come across it, and I've done some linguistic studies in general. The master was very linguistically oriented, and then I've studied a few other things, but the most relevant is probably my then later bachelor and master in language technology, and I try to keep a kind of linguistic approach. I've also worked, I guess, relevant stuff is on. Or sorry, I've studied lexicography. So yeah, I mean, like the science of making dictionaries, right? And encyclopedias and things like this, depending a bit on who you ask. And I'm now sitting in kind of this terminology council for artificial intelligence for Norwegian, where we are also trying to find good good terms, good words for English concept or for English terms to translate and have good ways of expressing these concepts in Norwegian. So I mean, in terms of my competence, I think I'm. We don't know yet if I'm going to be of help, but at least I am. I would be very happy if some of my knowledge can be useful, and I have some. I mean, I was hoping to kind of make a small presentation, which I unfortunately have not been able to do, but I hope that this is not the only meeting we have, and maybe we can talk a bit and see. But in terms of practical knowledge of some reconstruction tips and tricks and what you might want to look for and look out for when doing these things. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you. I also learned so much more than I managed to do over that beer. So this is what a background. It's super interesting. I think we can continue with Kambai. Feel free to ask all the questions you want and let the conversation go.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mali and Peter. Yeah, I actually uh, got very interested in the part dealing with reconstruction because when we speak Tyap, most times we have certain words that are actually made.
I think maybe.
I think we lost you, Kambai. Oh, it's so typical.
Sorry, a call came in. I just put it off. Yeah, so actually, when we speak Tiap, we have these words of Hausa language being put because Hausa is actually the largest language spoken around the region where Tiap is. And then we have words like the words for lion, and because these animals have been missing or have been extinct from our region for quite a long time, the words for them are no more used. So, like words for hyena, the Hausa word for hyena is kura. But so in Tiap, most people they use the word kura instead of hyena, instead of the word for hyena. So it was last year or last 2 years when I was checking the articles written by Roger Blanche on Benue Congo languages and Plateau languages. Then I saw how the hyena was called in a language like Berom, for example, they call it Murum, and then in language like Hiam, which is western part of Tiap, it is called Muri, and then in the area where Tiap is spoken, there's a village that's called Makomorum. So, if you ask what's the meaning of Makomorum, a lot of people cannot be able to tell you the meaning of that very town. So I was like, is it not possible that the word for hyena in Tiap should be Amorum? Because usually Tiap words start with that uh, the noun class and then any other thing follows. So that was when we actually were able to kind of bring back that very word Amorum to mean the hyena in Tiap. And then the word for lion, yeah, we are still looking around because in Nigeria we have about the major languages that are being spoken there, mainly Niger Congo languages, and within the Niger Congo, I think they are mainly Benue Congo, and you know the classification has been scattered over and over. But in the older classification, we have the Yoruboid languages, and then we have the Igboid, the Idomoid, the Nupoid, and then the Platoid. And so when I looked at the Platoid, what do certain languages call the lion? In the Platoid, I see that a lot of languages don't have the word for lion, kind of. and but the Jukunoid, which is part of the Platoid, they actually call theirs Azenku instead of Zaki. And then the Igboid, they use the word Idu, and then the Nupoid use Agaba. So these words sound a bit different. So how do we now get out the word that possibly was used for Tiap, in Tiap? So we still have that one to take care of. We also have a lot of words that are also missing like that. So I was thinking, when I got to speak with Mali, is it possible for us to kind of see a way of reconstructing some of these words instead of us using the raw Hausa words? Which is, by the way, Hausa is an Afro-Asiatic language, and by default, it doesn't really relate much to Tiaf. I think Fulfulde, that's Fulani, is even more related kind of to Tiaf to some extent. And and then also, secondly, I was then thinking about the entire Platoid languages, because traditionally, when our elders speak, they kind of relate the cultures of the central Nigerian area, especially those of the Kainji speaking people, the Plateau speaking people, and then the Jukunoid people as kind of their relatives, because whenever you even see the cultural displays, there are these similarities. Even the way they do their things in the way of religion, they are all kind of similar. So a word developed in the 1950s, the word Nenzit kind of means our people. And so this word is kind of what we are trying to use as an umbrella name for these cultures that are related, which all mainly fall under the Platoid group of languages. And so I was thinking, is it also possible for us to, just like the European Union was able to develop Esperanto out of maybe Latino, Romance languages, Germanic languages, the Celtic languages, and then brought out this singular word, language? Is it also possible for us to kind of reconstruct another language based on the root form of the Platoid language family, so that even if it is not something that we achieve within maybe 10 years, 20 years, perhaps that would lay the foundation for further, development, or maybe further teaching if the language is developed. Because I also got into talking with a particular linguist in our area. He's a speaker of the Hiam language, and they were like, "Is it possible for us within our area called Southern Kaduna area to write a particular dictionary that would have the different languages of our area? If we say, for example, the word buy, Bai means come in Tiaf, and then maybe next to it we have the translation for the next language, the translation for next language, even though the dictionary will be very bulky. But can we do something like that? So we actually started the discussion, but we never really completed that very discussion. So that was the reason why I said, okay, let me bring it further, so that if it is possible for us to have a kind of a reconstructed language called the Nenzit language, or based on the Platoid language root, I think that would be quite beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the description. It's very interesting to hear, and it's it's in a way it's sad, right, that you have words that are so difficult to find when you have lost something in some way, and think it's I mean, it's important work, right, to try to kind of be able to find these words again. So I feel like there are many points here that you mentioned. So if I so I feel like there's at least maybe three or three things. One thing is about, yeah, are there techniques that you can use to more confidently be able to reconstruct individual words, like the word for lion, for example. Yes, there are techniques that you can use that we can look at, and it can be quite technical. And I don't know so much about these plateau languages, and it depends. So the success of those kind of techniques vary a lot on what data you have available from the other languages, right? And if I understood correctly, in the first example with the hyenas, you were able to kind of reconstruct the word because the word seemed to be present in a place name or name of a village.
Yeah.
So that okay, this looks like it might come from here. So then you can more confidently actually find it. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct.
But in some cases, maybe like this lion case, you don't have any trace, right? You might not have anything, and then you can. So I mean, you run into two scenarios in this case: a case where, based on external evidence, you can find cases in your language where people didn't really know that, oh, originally this had this meaning, or this is maybe composed or derived from something else, and then you can use external evidence to find out what that actually meant, and then you can use that in new ways, maybe, right?
Yeah.
But then in some cases, you don't have any sort of internal, like if it's completely lost in the language and you want to find something, then you're dealing with actual reconstruction, right? And then in some cases, these reconstructions, I mean, there you can never really know with a proper reconstruction. We can never really know what the original is, but we can make a guess, right? And I think it's worth. It seems like you also think that these guesses are worth it, right? Because you will find something that is based on something you know is real, and that it's very likely that this was the case. And it has a pedagogical and cultural value as well, right? Because you know that this is a likely thing. For example, let's take a constructed example from. Let's say that in Norwegian we had the same situation. We lost a lot of words, but then we can look to English, right? And then we see that, for example, house in Norwegian is hus, and mouse is mus. But then say that we don't have the word for spouse in Norwegian. And then if we don't know anything, we could just say that that word is spus, which is not actually the word that we use. Now we use a completely different word, like ektefelle, or there might be a word. Now I'm just taking this from my head. There might be an actual cognate, right? A word that's the same in two sister languages, um, but then at the same time, if we say that, okay, let's just make spus the word for spouse in Norwegian, we can use that, and as long as we accept that, that's okay, right? And that's the kind of thing that we could do for a language where you don't have it. So we risk having a word that might be in a way invented, but it's invented in good faith, right? And then just stop me if I'm talking too much, but the next point I wanted to talk about is this idea of, and I'm sorry if I didn't catch the name you said for this whole group. Could you write it
Yeah,
in the
Nenzit.
Nenzit?
Yeah, Nenzit. That's let me write it in the chat.
Thank you. Nenzit.
Yeah.
Am I saying it okay?
You're correct. You're correct.
Great. So you talk about Esperanto, right? And
Yeah.
I just want to clarify a bit. So Esperanto is not really a reconstruction, right? It's an invented language based largely on Romance languages, but with some other European elements. And the reason I want to separate those terms a bit is just because they are two slightly different things, right? You could make a proto language, which is kind of the ideal reconstruction of what we think something was a few hundred or thousands of years ago, right? But you could also make something a bit more like Esperanto as a kind of lingua franca, or like I mean, like common language. So that kind of, I guess, is not so that you don't have to choose one language to kind of represent, because I guess that's some of the idea, right? You don't want to
Yeah,
say
very
that,
well.
oh, Tyap should be the language for everyone in
Yeah,
this area, right?
that's it. That's
Or Hyam, or was it Hyam?
yeah,
Yeah.
here.
Um, and in finding that kind of, so I feel like those are two different processes, and both could be useful for the language communities. I think having like this constructed but common language that kind of embodies the cultural and linguistic properties of as many languages as possible. So I guess all of those who identify with this Nenzit culture, and then a more kind of I don't want to say scientific, but like linguistic reconstruction, which might not be a good working language. It's because these constructions might be technical and might be useful for understanding the languages, but not necessarily practical as a working language. But then you could try to reconstruct and then take the reconstruction and then make that into a practical language in a way. That's also possible. And yes, and I feel like they seem to involve. I think they might involve a lot of the same processes to do that. Like, one thing in that line of thought is that, which I think is easy to forget when kind of working with new written languages or kind of orthographies or ways of writing languages that haven't been written, is that things don't actually have to be so fixed. And I think that's one thing that's a good point from a Norwegian point of view, because we had some language struggles in the end of the 19th centuries. We were occupied by Denmark for a long time and wanted to find our own written language. And then many different people had many different ideas. And we ended up with two written languages for one spoken language. I don't know if you've heard or if you have discussed this, Marley, or no?
The nynorsk and the
Ah,
bokmål.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so one thing is that we have two written languages for the same spoken language, but also that within these written norms, you have a lot of options. And I feel sometimes that people are afraid to encourage or include options. So it's perfectly fine. So, for example, say that you have several different villages and say that they have one word. So this is a bit different discussion, but I think it's still a bit related. That, okay, you want to write a word, but then one village says this and another village says this, and then you don't have to decide. You can just say that both are okay, right? And then in terms of education. That's, I mean, when I learn written Norwegian, I have to learn a lot of words that I would not really use in my family, but maybe some other families use it, right? And then that's kind of the language community evolves a bit in that sense by including all these options. Oh, sorry, did you? I see, frozen again. I'll wait a bit because I guess this is not. Sorry, did we freeze for you?
No,
No, it's okay.
you're on.
Okay. So and I think the reason why I bring up this variation thing is that because I think this can also work across languages. So, for example, in Scandinavia, so in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, if you look at like product packaging, sometimes you see it written in just one line, and then they have like slashes for different words in the languages. But the languages are so close that we can more or less write something that is kind of a common language. And I think this is kind of a third option if you think about writing a language that encompasses all of these. But that, of course, depends a lot on how different these languages really are. But it is kind of, in some cases, it might be possible to kind of define without doing, well, you could include some reconstruction, of course, but you could also kind of just combine all of the languages and have kind of a language that allows for a lot of variation. But this I'm saying without really knowing, like, I mean, how close are like Tyap and Hyam? Are there? Could you understand any of the other without having studied it, or?
No, Tyap and Hyam are a bit difficult to understand, even though we have some cognate words, like even within the Hyam speaking cluster, you find a lot of variations. Some of the Hyam speaking people may not even understand themselves, and the same thing within the Tyap speaking cluster, we find difficulties understanding some other dialects. So when a Hyam speaking person speaks, we don't really understand.
Right. Yeah, then it's challenging, of course, to do this. Then it sounds like, I mean, this kind of process can be used within Tyap or Hyam, but not across, I think. Yeah, okay. The final thing you mentioned was this, you had this idea about a dictionary, right?
Yeah.
So, I didn't bring it. I have it sounded like a kind of a dictionary of like related languages.
Yeah.
That's what you meant, right? I've seen
Yeah.
that. I have one of those for like Turkic languages, where you have like a lot of different languages, and then it's the same word. Yeah. I mean, the biggest issue in all of this is, of course, to what extent you can contact the different language communities and gather data, right? But if there is like some technical solutions, and then that's also something I can help with. We could, for example, I mean, I'm sure the Wikimedia organization also has some tools, but it's also possible to, for example, just make a GitHub. Oh, do you use any coding, or are you familiar with programming or anything?
Not so much, just a little of the PHP and HTML used in Wikimedia Foundation projects.
Right. Because that's something I could help you with, to kind of have places to store data, for example, because I think this dictionary that you talk about, that kind of work is important in all of these other things that you want to do, right? Both in terms of reconstruction and proto-language and everything. Yeah, sorry, Molly?
Very old school. I just want to say, because this dictionary thing, I have been thinking a lot about this since we have Wiktionary in the Wikimedia community, and then we have Wikidata. And both of them are places where people are adding data about languages. But so still it doesn't exist any program that is able to gather all this data and create a dictionary that you can print. that is a tool we should have, because there is data there, and the platform is quite good of you can organize meetings to gather more data, but there is a missing link, and if someone would create that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because then that's work that could be done, and I feel like that's kind of the first step here, maybe. Anyways, and once you get these dictionaries, I mean, there are many people who could help you more than I could, but I can still help you with looking at the data and kind of helping you to see how to start reconstruction and how what kind of, sometimes it's easy to see and sometimes it's difficult, and but I mean, a good start is, for example, just looking at numbers in as many dialects of the language as you can gather, and from as many languages that are related as possible. For example,
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Yeah, like, sorry, let me get in a little bit. So we're actually thinking about recently about maybe renaming the Tyap Wikimedians user group to the Nenzit Wikimedians user group, so that we'll be able to bring in all these languages within the central Nigerian area into our work. And one of the purposes is for us to be able to get into these communities and contact their language boards, their translators, and then be able to get data to, you know, put them on Wikimedia Foundation projects like maybe Wikimedia Commons, and then maybe start Wikipedia projects in these languages. So with that available, I think we're going to gather a lot of data, but then it's something that we may not be able to achieve within a short period of time. Maybe we're looking at in the next 5 years or so for us to be able to achieve, a lot of, because around central Nigeria we have at least about 300 languages. Yeah, very many, and most of these languages they are not written, and that's just the major challenge we have. But then I think Roger Blanche, this linguist from America, he's actually doing a lot of work within central Nigeria. I can see most of his data collection. They are available online. So probably if we would be able to meet with him, um, I don't know how possible, but we can be able to get some of this data. I don't know how we may, but we'll do our best to gather everything together, as much as possible.
I'm very sure that any linguist who works on languages in the region would be very happy to see people who are interested in that work. I would just, I mean, I think that sounds like a very good thing to do, to contact people who are actually familiar with the languages of the region. And I mean, there might be work on. I haven't read the papers on Tyap, so there might already be work on some reconstruction, right? I don't know if you've read any of that or seen.
I'm not sure there's any.
No.
Sure. Except maybe the language board, I communicated with one of the translators. He told me in those days, in the 90s, they usually go to interior villages to listen to the people speak, and then they begin to record their words. So that was how they were able to gather the words that they used for the translation of the Tyap New Testament. But
Right.
even with that, they were not able to gather all the words that were necessary to be gathered.
Yeah, because some words are just not frequent enough, right? So even if you
Yeah,
talk for a long time, it's difficult to get
yeah,
all the words.
yeah,
Um, but I mean, if you want to, I think it's possible to speed up the process a bit. I mean, like if you want to have enough data to be able to do some reconstruction or to come up with some plausible combinations, I think um, one thing is that we talk. Have you heard about Swadesh lists?
yeah. I heard of
Yeah.
Swedish list.
So they can be useful, and maybe this is. I mean, like the field develops, and maybe my some of. I mean, some of these things can be a bit old-fashioned, but if you, for example, record um, numbers, like just a short list of like so the basic numbers and some other basic words that you know are they don't actually have. I mean, Swedish lists are supposed to be general, right? But in your
Yeah,
case, if there is some cultural things that are important, then collecting those words that might be similar across because they're so important, the words might be similar across different languages.
yeah.
And if you can collect just a few of these from many different places, then it's easier to see the patterns because that's what we're interested in when we want to look at
Okay.
reconstruction, right? To see
What?
um, yeah what is common in all of these places.
All right. That is doable. So we'll work on that, and then at the end of the day, we'll compile everything in a particular location. And since we're in constant communication, or will be in constant communication, I will let you know of what we are able to come up with in the next few months. Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be written data, right? I mean, like if you can write it down, that's good, but it's also good to
So,
have the original spoken data, especially because something is always lost when we have writing, right? We have to make some sacrifice for for readability, and sometimes we don't need these small distinctions that we might hear, but those might be important for reconstruction, for example. Um, uh, so um, so I think that's if you can gather those kind of data, then that would help you a lot. And then because like in the mouse house spouse, which is a bit example, at least in mouse and house you have whos and moose, and we know that that's kind of a regular. It's not from English to Norwegian. It's not from Norwegian to English. It's from the common language, right? As
yeah,
you know, and then some sound changes happened in one way here, and then some happened in one way here, and then and sometimes you don't need a lot of data to establish at least some of these correspondences. So, for example, especially, I mean, like if you're lucky, you'll have words that you see change, and then you'll see another word that is missing, but that looks exactly like other words that you have many examples of with regular changes. That's what we would like to see, right? Um, yeah.
Can I ask, Kamai, where do you store all the data, all the recordings you have now? Do you put everything on Wikimedia Commons or you have another database to store things?
mm, for now, is on Wikimedia Commons. But then I still have some on my computer, especially those having to do with the Tyap language, because so thus far we have really been concentrating on just Tyap. Then we're thinking maybe when we're able to sufficiently deal with Tyap, then we begin to spread over to other related languages. Mm, mm,
Okay, good. We are closing to the hour, so I don't want to hold you all too much. But is there any kind of concrete things you see that Petter, for example, you can already help with or come by? Anything like concrete actions or yeah, anything special that you would like to follow up?
yeah, okay, maybe I'll start and then Peter will come. So yeah, so maybe for action points, the first one would be to gather audio and possibly written translations of certain words from the Swadesh list in these languages that we're looking at, and then also um, I don't know, and then also probably look at the similarities in words in existing data to be able to reconstruct the words that are missing in the Tyap language within the next few months. I think basically.
And I can try. Maybe we can have some digital contact as well, and because I can help you maybe with set up some concrete. I mean, there are different ways of setting up these lists in terms of how words look and how word pairs are, and because sometimes words don't have to mean the exact same thing, right? So that's something I could have talked a bit about, but I'm not going to. But like for example. Oh, I thought I would just give one example quickly, but I mean, one word might mean darkness in one language, but it means cloud in another language, even though it's originally the same word. So this is a theoretical example. It's based on, I mean, there are some theories like this in some languages, but or sometimes maybe a word means hill in one language and mountain in another, or sea in one language but lake in another. And these then usually, at least if we see that there are many words that kind of have similar changes, then we can assume that it's the same word, even though the meaning has changed a little bit. So this is something to be aware of. And then we try to gather these words that mean the same, and then we compare them. And maybe I can help you at least make this kind of comparison table. And I think it might be possible to just So what would be nice to have is a list of all the languages that you know that there is maybe some papers or information about, maybe in Wiktionary or Wikimedia already, or in the literature, that we could try to gather to see. So any language that you think is related to Tyap.
No problems. I'll work on that and then I'll let you know. Yeah.
Great.
Hey, thank you so much. This is so interesting. It's outside my field, but I feel I could follow anyway. If you're okay with it, I would love to keep following you up, and maybe we can set up a meeting a little bit later when you have come across or when something has happened, a bit to see how it works. And then, of course, you can keep in touch and work together.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
And thank you for. I mean, this is very exciting to be allowed to help with. So I'm very happy.
Yeah.
And this is what I was hoping to achieve, because this is one example of many where there is so much enthusiasm and so much hard work going on, and then we have so much knowledge here that can just come and help. So I hope we have established a good bridge.
Yeah, very well. So thank you, Molly. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kanbai.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Yeah, bye bye.
Bye.